Warsaw, Cleveland's Slavic village, 7 in the morning, Tuesday, July 1931. Stefania Nowak, 3rd floor, brick walk-up on Hosmer Street. Before she put the coffee on, she went to the front window and set a square cardboard card against the glass, turned so the number 50 faced the street. Then she went back to the kitchen and opened the top hatch of the wooden icebox. What was left of Saturday's block was the size of a loaf of bread, sitting in its zinc-lined compartment, sweating. The milk below it was still good. It would not be good tomorrow. The card was not decoration. It was a communication system. 4 numbers, 1 on each edge, 25, 50, 75, 100, and whichever number pointed up was an order. Somewhere on his route through Warsaw, a man with a rubber cape on his shoulder would look up at her window from the seat of his wagon, read the 50, and know that the 3rd floor needed 50 pounds of ice carried up 3 flights of stairs before noon, because the 3rd floor in July was already 80 degrees at 7 in the morning and everything in that icebox was in a slow race against the heat. Stefania had done arithmetic before she set the card. 75 pounds lasted longer per pound, less of it melted away as surface loss. 50 was what the week's budget said. Her husband was on short hours at the mill that summer. The depression was 2 years old on Hosmer Street. The card said 50, and the 50 said everything about what the household could afford to keep cold. Here is the thing to hold on to: the cold in Stefania Nowak's kitchen was not a condition. It was a delivery. It arrived by wagon, on a schedule, at a price, carried on a man's shoulder, and it began disappearing the moment it came through the door. Every working kitchen in Warsaw ran on that same arrangement, cold as a substance you bought by the pound and rationed like coal. So the first question is the one the card itself asks: what exactly was the system on the other end of that window? Who cut the cold? Who carried it? What did it cost? And what had the city already decided about which kitchens could afford to keep their milk from turning? The system on the other end of Stefania Nowak's window was an industry old enough to have started on frozen lakes. Through the 19th century, American ice was harvested, cut in winter from ponds and rivers in 200-pound cakes, packed in sawdust in ice houses, and sold all summer. By the time Stefania was setting her card in 1931, that world was mostly gone. The ice in her window order came from a plant, ammonia compressors freezing city water in steel cans, 300 pounds at a time, year-round. Cleveland was, in fact, one of the capitals of that industry. City Ice and Fuel, one of the largest ice companies in the country, was headquartered there. The cold in Warsaw's kitchens was a manufactured product with a corporate address downtown. From the plant, the system narrowed to a man and a route. The Iceman ran the same streets on the same days, reading windows. He scored the big block with an ice pick, split off the 50, weighed it by eye and experience, gripped it with iron tongs, swung it onto the leather pad on his shoulder, and climbed. 3 flights, 100 times a day, in July. He came through the kitchen door without ceremony, slid the block into the zinc compartment, took his coins from the sugar bowl or the housewife's hand, and was gone. And the icebox itself, understand what it was and was not. It was not a machine. It was a cabinet, oak outside, zinc or galvanized steel inside, cork or charcoal packed between as insulation, with a drain tube running down to a pan under the floor of it. It made nothing. It only slowed the death of the cold you paid for. Sears catalog listings for household ice boxes in this period document prices from roughly $15 to $35, a one-time purchase. The ice was the real cost, because the ice never stopped needing to be bought. Before we continue, if this kind of documentation is what you have been looking for, consider subscribing. Every video on this channel goes into one specific element of American life in the heat before air conditioning came home: the fan, the Iceman, the movie theater at 9 o'clock, the front stoop at midnight, the Sears catalog in October, the window unit arriving next door, and what each of these things meant for the specific people who organized their summers around them. Not nostalgia for the front porch. The documented physical reality of a heat problem that some households managed with a fan and a wet sheet, and others managed by not surviving the heat wave. The card in the window gave the kitchen the one thing it could not make for itself: cold, carried up 3 flights on a stranger's shoulder, and the refrigerator would end the asking. And if you lived this, or your family did, the fan on the dresser, the Tuesday night theater, the window unit that arrived on your floor, put it in the comments. Did your family have an icebox? Do you remember the card in the window, the drip pan in the morning, the Iceman's knock, or chasing the wagon for a sliver of ice? Next on this channel, the air-conditioned movie theater, the 2 hours of cold that 35 cents could buy. Back to the third floor. So the system was plant, wagon, shoulder, zinc box. But the system had a price per pound. And the question the price asks, what did 50 pounds of ice, twice a week, actually mean inside a Depression household budget on Hosmer Street, and what happened in the kitchens where the arithmetic did not work? What did the ice cost? Period pricing documented in trade and newspaper sources of the era puts delivered ice in the range of roughly 40 to 60 cents per 100 pounds in many American cities in the early 1930s, which sounds like nothing until you run it the way Stephanie and Nowak ran it. 50 pounds, twice a week, June through September. Call it $1 a week in high summer, sometimes more in a heat wave when the ice melted faster than the schedule. Her husband, on short hours, was bringing home perhaps $15 to $20 a week, a documented range for mill families in Depression-era Cleveland. The cold was costing the household 5% of everything it earned, in the months when it earned least. And here is what the arithmetic actually protected: the milk. A family with 3 children ran on milk, and milk in an 85-degree kitchen turned in hours. The ice was not comfort. Nobody in Warsaw was cooling the room with it. The ice was food safety, the difference between the Sunday roast stretching to Wednesday and the Sunday roast going into the garbage Monday night, between milk for the children and a child sick from milk that had turned. Public health campaigns of the era said it plainly: the icebox was preventive medicine, and the ice bill was the premium. So the household managed the cold the way it managed coal. The block went in wrapped in newspaper to slow the melt, even though the ice company said not to, because the paper blocked the air circulation the box was designed around. The door was opened on a schedule. Children were shouted at for standing in front of it. The drip pen was emptied every morning before it overflowed onto the kitchen floor, the first chore of the day, all summer, every summer. Cold was a substance, and the household stretched it the way it stretched everything else in 1931. But notice what the arithmetic assumes: a steady 50 pounds, twice a week, all season. That was the arithmetic of a household that was poor and managing. The question the $1 a week asks is about the kitchens one neighborhood over, where the dollar was not there. What did the geography of ice look like? Who bought cold by the 100 pounds? Who bought it by the dime-sized piece? And what did that difference cost the people on the wrong side of it? The geography of ice in an American city followed the geography of money, and in the 1930s, the geography of money had been drawn on actual maps. Cleveland's Central Avenue corridor, where the city's black population had been confined by restrictive covenants and redlining, held some of the oldest housing stock in the city: frame houses and subdivided tenements with less shade, more pavement, higher rents per square foot than Warsaw, and lower wages behind the door. In those kitchens, the documented pattern across American cities looks like this: less likely a full-sized icebox, more likely a small chest, or none. Ice bought not by the standing 50-pound order but by the 10 or 15-pound piece, carried home from the ice station or the wagon, day by day, dime by dime. And the arithmetic of small pieces is brutal in a specific way: small ice costs more per pound and melts faster per pound, more surface, less mass. The household with the least money paid the highest rate for cold and got the shortest life out of it. Economists have a name for it now: the poverty premium. On Central Avenue in 1933 it did not have a name. It was just Tuesday. And when the heat came in force, the difference stopped being about milk. The 1936 North American heat wave, the deadliest in the documented record, killed thousands of Americans in a matter of weeks, and the mortality did not distribute itself evenly. It concentrated where it always concentrates: top-floor rooms, treeless blocks, old housing, the elderly, the poor. Public health records of the era document city responses: extended ice distribution, hydrants opened, parks kept open at night for sleeping. Ice, in a documented emergency like 1936, moved from grocery bill to survival infrastructure. The households that could not maintain a standing ice order all summer were the same households sleeping in the parks that July. 2 kitchens, then, in the same city, in the same week of the same summer. In one, the card goes in the window and 50 pounds walks up the stairs. In the other, a child is sent 6 blocks with a dime and comes back with 15 pounds wrapped in a sack, a quarter of it gone before it reaches the box. Same city. Same heat. Different cold. Which raises the question the ledger cannot answer: past the prices and the pounds, what did the ice actually give the household that had it? What was it like to live with, day to day, and who was the man carrying it up the stairs? Stephanie Nowak did not have an ice strategy. She had a Tuesday and a Friday. The card went in the window at 7. The block came up before noon. The milk, the butter, the eggs, whatever the butcher had sold cheap, everything went into the box in an order she never had to think about, because she had been loading it the same way since she was a girl loading her mother's. Top shelf closest to the ice for the milk. Meat wrapped and touching the zinc. Butter in the covered dish where the cold pooled at the bottom. She knew the box the way a stoker knows a furnace. It was not a routine. It was thermal engineering, run by hand, twice a week, by every housewife on Hosmer Street. And the ice did more than guard the food. On the worst days it became the household's only source of cold in any form. A chip in a glass of water for the old men who couldn't stop sweating. A sliver wrapped in a dish towel against a child's fever. Shavings in a pan set in front of the fan, the poor man's air conditioning, documented in household practice across the era, a trick that dropped the air a few degrees for as long as the ice lasted, which was never long. In a heat wave, the ice card went to 75, the budget be damned, because the ice was doing double duty, preserving the food and rationing out the only relief the third floor had. Understand what this meant standing in that kitchen, the cold was tangible. You could hold it, weigh it, watch it disappear. A modern refrigerator makes cold invisibly, silently, endlessly. The icebox made you watch your cold die every single day and pay a man to bring you more of it. Nobody in Warsaw was sentimental about that arrangement. But it did mean the household had an exact, physical, daily knowledge of what cold was worth, a knowledge that would vanish so completely that their grandchildren would not understand the phrase, "Put the card in the window." The men who answered the card had a name on every street he served. Which brings us to him, the wagon, the route, the shoulder, and the children waiting on the curb. Who was the Iceman, and what exactly did the neighborhood lose when he stopped coming? The Iceman on the Hosmer Street route in the early 30s worked for one of the big companies or for himself, in Warsaw, often a Polish or Italian name, often a man who had bought his route the way other men bought a stall at the market. The route was property. It was a book of standing customers, a wagon or, increasingly by the mid-30s, a truck, and a set of relationships that took years to build. He knew which third-floor widow needed her block split in two because she couldn't lift it to reposition it. He knew which back doors were left unlocked on delivery mornings, and which kitchens kept the coins in the sugar bowl so the delivery could happen while the woman of the house was out. In an era before the phrase existed, the Iceman had keys to half the neighborhood, a level of domestic trust extended to almost no one else who worked the street. The work itself was brutal by any documented standard. 100 pounds on a leather shoulder pad, up and down tenement stairs, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, in exactly the weather that made the work necessary. Iceman's shoulders were famous, and so were their nicknames, their horses, and their tempers. The wagon horse knew the route as well as the men did, and period accounts across American cities document the same detail. The horse walked itself to the next regular stop while the Iceman was still upstairs. And behind the wagon, always, the children. This is one of the most widely documented rituals of American summer before the war. The Iceman scored a block, and the pick threw slivers and chips onto the wagon bed, and the children of the street materialized out of nowhere, barefoot on the hot pavement, waiting for him to flick the chips down. Some Iceman chipped a corner deliberately, off the books, for the kids. On a 90-degree afternoon in a neighborhood where nobody's kitchen made cold, a sliver of ice in a child's fist was the whole known technology of refreshment. Grown men and women interviewed in oral history projects half a century later could still describe the taste of it, which is to say, the taste of cold itself, back when cold was rare enough to have one. Hold that street in your mind, the wagon, the horse, the dripping tailgate, the children on the curb. Now ask what the whole scene was standing on. What did the kitchen and the street look like as a system, in the last years before the machine arrived that would make every piece of it, the card, the tongs, the route, the ritual, unnecessary? Before you can understand what the refrigerator ended, you need to see what the ice system actually was when you stood back from it, because it was never just a box in a kitchen. It was a machine the size of a city. The plant froze the water. The wagons fanned out at dawn. The cards went into the windows like signals in a code every driver could read. The blocks went up the stairs. The drip pans came down the stairs, in a manner of speaking, every morning. Multiply Stefania Nowak's kitchen by every kitchen in Warsaw, every kitchen in Cleveland, every kitchen in urban America, and you are looking at one of the largest daily logistics operations in the country, an entire industry, with plants and stables and routes and tens of thousands of men devoted to moving frozen water into kitchens one shoulder load at a time. And the system had a rhythm the whole street lived inside. The wagon on the block was an event with a schedule. The card in the window was a public statement, every neighbor could read your number, and everyone knew what a card that stayed at 25, or came down entirely, meant about the money inside. The drip pen was the summer's metronome. The Iceman's knock was a fixed point in a housewife's day. None of this was designed as social life. All of it functioned as social life, the same way the stoop did, the same way the theater line did. The ice system pulled the street into the kitchen and the kitchen out onto the street twice a week, and nobody thought of it as anything but buying ice. By the mid-1930s the system was at its historical peak, and it was already dying. Downtown, in the department store windows Stephania passed on her rare trips to Euclid Avenue, sat a white steel cabinet with a humming coil on top, and it did not need a card, a wagon, a man, or a single pound of anybody's ice. So the last question before the end, what was that machine, what did it cost, when could a Hosmer Street household finally afford one, and what happened to the Iceman, the horse, the card, and the children on the curb when the answer became, now? The machine in the department store window had been coming for a while. General Electric put its monitor top refrigerator on the market in 1927 at around $300, at a time when a new Ford could be had for not much more. In 1927, on Hosmer Street, that was not a purchase. It was a rumor. But the price did what post-war prices for window units would later do. It fell, year after year, as production scaled, and the machine climbed down the income ladder toward Warsaw. By 1940, census-era documentation puts an electric refrigerator in roughly 44% of American homes. By 1950, in the great post-war wave, ownership had passed 80%. In one generation, the machine went from a showroom rumor to the ordinary hum in nearly every American kitchen wall. Stephania Nowak's refrigerator came after the war, but the way her daughter Edna would later buy the window unit, on installments, after years of the catalog. And here is the precise thing it changed. The card came out of the window and never went back. The standing order was cancelled, awkwardly, in person, to a man she had known for 15 years. The drip pen went to the cellar. The icebox itself lingered for a while as a bread cabinet, the way obsolete furniture does, and then it went too. The cold was no longer a substance that arrived, was weighed, was rationed, and died. It was a condition. It was simply there, silently, endlessly, at the flip of nothing at all. And the street lost its machine. The ice routes contracted through the 40s, route by route, as each cancelled card made the round trip a little less worth making. The big ice companies saw it coming and diversified, into fuel, into cold storage, into the very refrigeration that was ending them. The wagons went first, then the trucks thinned, and in city after city the last residential ice routes wound down through the 1950s. The Iceman's knock stopped. The children stopped waiting on the curb, because there was no longer anything to wait for. No one mourned it at the time. It was progress, and it genuinely was. The milk was safer, the food budget went further, the woman of the house got her mornings back from the drip pan. Every documented measure of household life improved. If this channel is going to keep documenting what American life in the heat was and what it meant to the people who managed it, subscribe. There are more fans, more ice boxes, more Tuesday nights at the Lowe's State, more Sears catalogs open to page 312, and more window units arriving through one neighbor's window and changing what the whole floor thought about the following October. The card in the window gave the kitchen the one thing it could not make for itself, and the refrigerator ended the asking, and with the asking, the arrival. And if you have a summer, a fan, a stoop, a heat wave, an Iceman on your street, put it in the comments. Did your family keep an icebox? Do you remember the card, the drip pan, the knock, or the taste of a sliver of ice off the wagon? Next, the air-conditioned movie theater, the 2 hours of cold that 35 cents could buy. The last ice routes in the old neighborhoods closed in the 1950s. By then the hum was in nearly every kitchen wall on Hosmer Street. What the refrigerator gave the kitchen, the condition the wagon had been selling by the pound. Private. Silent. Endless. No card. No coins in the sugar bowl. No man on the stairs. What it did not give the street, a reason to watch for the wagon. The children on the curb in July 1955 were not waiting for anything. The cold had come inside, and it had come to stay, and it never again arrived on anyone's shoulder. The street was still there. The heat was still there. The knock was gone.